Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Suzanne Pichetti Johnson. I'm the program manager for Avenues to Wellness. We are a program of the Howard Foundation. So as always, a big thank you to the foundation for making the speaker series possible. And now I am very proud to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Seth Ferguson. Seth is the funeral director at Chapel by the Sea in Fort Bragg. He's been in the industry for 7 years, and he sort of found it unexpectedly. And tonight we're going to learn all about green burial. So thank you very much for being here tonight, Seth.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about green burials, specifically on the coast, and some of the things that we're able to do on the cemeteries there, and a novelty service that Chapel by the Sea is able to do in our Burial at Sea program, where a full body can be taken out to the ocean and buried there. And it is considered green. And so we'll go over some of that. Before that, though, has anyone lived on the coastline between Point Arena and Westport? Are we all inland folk? Okay. That'll be important as we go through it, and I'll circle back as to why, okay? A few things we'll go over are policies, processes, and pre-planning for green burial if it's going to be on the coast. We'll go over some organic containers and caskets, biodegradable urns if you end up being someone that's more of a cremation person, but still wants their ashes to be buried or scattered in a green manner. We'll go over the full body burial at sea, scattering at sea, and then lastly we'll quickly cover some composting information, where it's headed in California and where it's at now. And then traditional green burials on the coast, okay? So green burial, in my experience, I've learned is kind of a spectrum. It's not one solid definition. There's not anything written down that's going to say this is a green burial, can't sway from here, it can't sway to there. When it comes to in the earth green burial, 3 things I've found consistent. 1, at the cemetery, a vault is not required. What a vault is when the grave is opened for your casket to be placed in, oftentimes concrete or plastic, and every once in a while you get like a redwood vault or a wooden vault, but it's a box essentially that's placed into the grave for your casket to be set into, and they oftentimes are sealed with a lid, and their purpose is to keep the cemetery grounds even. With green burial, because there's not as much of a cavity that's being taken up by a casket or the lack of a vault, they tend to sink in over time. And that's why a lot of the older cemeteries that you go to will have sunken graves, and you'll see sometimes headstones that have fallen over, and they've got that traditional cemetery look to them that you may have thought of as a kid or ventured through. And so that's one of the things with green burial, is that there's not going to be that vault that keeps its structure, for better or worse. Another aspect of green burial is typically, and more so obviously, there's not going to be an embalming or the preservation of the human body through the chemical means. The body is going to be as natural as it can be, with as little going into the casket or into the ground as possible, plastics removed, things like that. Of course, there are exceptions, but the idea is to go as organically as you can. And then the third is a biodegradable container or shroud. Something all wood, maybe seagrass or a wicker casket, a wooden box. Or at the chapel, we just started doing just shrouds on kind of a tray, a wooden tray, to lower into the ground. At this point, there are cemeteries on the coast that allow just the shroud, no tray or anything, just straight into the ground. However, I'm not the funeral home that's going to do that. At this point, I still require some kind of structure, albeit at least a wooden plank, to lower your body into the ground. But those are kind of the 3 spears of what, in my experience, especially on the coast, what makes a green burial is a biodegradable container or shroud, a lack of a vault, and then and no embalming. an organic self. And again, no plastics and usually limited jewelry, things like that. Pretty close to just going in yourself. As I mentioned, we've got things such as the wicker, or most funeral homes will carry an all-wood casket. It's pretty standard, especially because many communities, such as the Jewish community, require that they go into something biodegradable, and typically pine or wood. Um, there's also options because burial is expensive and it is difficult. So many people do opt to be cremated and then buried. There's multiple options nowadays for urns. A few examples are like an ecosphere, which can be made of sand or clay or earth material, and they're meant to be buried in the ground, and they'll break apart and return to the earth, as close to natural as possible. Um, there's a couple others like the Himalayan salt urn, um, and there's some that bloom into flowers and things like that, or that are built to be set into water and they float away and things like that. So other than traditional green burial in cemeteries in the ground, Chapel by the Sea offers full body burials at sea. A few things that we need to go over when it comes to burial at sea are the policies. California does require that we go 3 nautical miles out of the coast. In Fort Bragg, we leave out of the harbor there, the South Harbor, and we go 3 nauticals pretty much straight out and usually end up about 5 miles out at sea. And that's because the second regulation is that we need a shelf that's 700 feet deep. This ensures that your body goes down and does not come back up and go through the cycle again. So 700 feet, and we've got a shelf about 5 miles out that reaches over 1,000. So we always try and hit that point and then geolocate it, and that's where we'll do the burial. And the final thing that they require is that whoever is going into the ocean is properly weighted. They have to be 300 pounds. Now, the way we keep that green is that we use an iron board at Chapel by the Sea. After researching different metals, I came to the conclusion that iron would be the most natural. Over years, it will break down in the ocean. We use a bamboo shroud. It's pretty lightweight. It's meant just for the purpose of point A to point B, and then it's going to break down pretty quick. And then legally, we can use a metal casket. So we can drill holes in a casket and then drop someone that way. However, I don't usually recommend it as it's not as green as the iron board process. But it is legal.
See, the iron board is an iron board.
It is literally just an iron board. They weigh about 275 pounds. And then we use a strong rope, a fishing rope, to secure the individual to the board. It runs through the shroud, so people don't usually see the rope or anything, and then loved ones oftentimes will bring flowers to put on, things of that nature. And other than that, there's surprisingly few regulations. It's much more possible than many people know, if they know it's possible at all. And then just circling back to scattering options, you can always bury an urn that's biodegradable, or we can take you out and you can also drop a biodegradable urn in the water if direct scattering isn't your thing. Some people don't like to see the ashes, and that's perfectly okay. So there are urns that'll completely break away with the ashes in the water. And then lastly, Chapel by the Sea has been working hard with Earth Funeral and Recompose. Earth Funeral's got a location in Las Vegas and Seattle, and they're a composting location. I find that they're a little quicker to work with and things like that if composting is something anyone is interested in. It's currently not in California, but it does plan to be unrolled in January of 2027. Being that we're pretty close to Sacramento and San Francisco, I would take a bet that it won't be long into 27 before we get them popping up in the cities near us, though I'm not sure about any closer. Recompose is another one. I started working with them a couple years ago in Seattle. They're another good composting place, and they actually give the soil back to the family, while Earth Funeral, in my experience, keeps it and does whatever they do with it. They don't mail it, though.
Is it a mushroom process?
It is not. So I'm not sure exactly their chemical process to it, but in the facility there's like these honeycomb shaped homes, I guess, that people are kind of put into, and then they're composted like anything else, and slowly turned into soil. And it does take a number of weeks, so it's not a quick process. Um, because they're so far away, especially with Seattle, they've got some funny transport laws. So at this point, we transport individuals who die in Mendocino, the county, up to Seattle, and then over to Las Vegas. So that's our involvement, and then hopefully in 2027, when it's here, we'll get close with a funeral home that's doing it in the Bay Area or something like that, and still offer that transport. Circling back to our green burials and where you lived, the reason I ask that is that on the coast, the cemeteries do require, at least most of them, for you to have lived in the district of the cemetery, to have owned property in the district of the cemetery, or for a family member to have been buried in the district cemetery in the past. However, there are a couple exceptions, one of which is Cuffy's Cove. They do not have any restrictions as to who can be buried there, and they do allow green burial. So no vault, no embalming, and essentially any casket that you could, biodegradable casket. Cuffy's Cove is by Elk, so about an hour south of Fort Bragg. And then the other one would be Ocean View Cemetery. That's a privately endowed cemetery owned by Chris Strickland in Fort Bragg. So this one has a section for green burial. He does have a non-green cemetery, so all of his other spots have vaults in them, and is very structured, but he is now opened up a green section for people who are interested in that. And it will have no vaults. The plots will actually be much larger than his standard plots, so that there's room for that cave-ins and space for the next person to go in. And then I think it's worth noting, even though it didn't seem like anyone had lived in the Casper community, they're the only cemetery that actually goes under the terminology of a green cemetery. They try and do everybody as green as possible. And so the Casper community typically has been, in the last few years, all buried in the same wicker type of basket. They've kind of caught on to a community culture there. And so I just thought that was an interesting tidbit, that they're an actual green cemetery that specifies in that kind of thing. Westport, just a fun one for Westport. They're the main one that's advertising and allowing people to go in as naturally as possible, even just a sheet. Though, like I said, the funeral home has not caught up to such progress. Just don't have the optics quite figured out yet. So those are kind of the basics of where we're at with things. Green on the coast. And I did want to open up for any questions that people may have, in particular the burial at sea, as that's kind of our novelty green burial option.
Do any of these allow like a tree to be planted on the green spot?
So typically no. Most of the cemeteries will allow flowers or small planted things like small bushes and things, but most do ask for trees not to be planted. I at least know that for Casper and Cuffy's Cove. Cuffy's Cove has a natural naked ladies bloom that happens every year, and they try and preserve that pretty strongly. And it goes throughout the whole cemetery.
If you wanted to be buried inland, you'd have to go to Sonoma County. Is that true?
Yeah, I did hear from one of our friends that there is a cemetery in Sonoma County that does green burials, and then Anchor Lucier here in Willits, your funeral home here, they'd have probably more good information on inland, the nearest place to go. My knowledge is pretty based on the coast. Yeah.
There's a lot of rules about the mortuary's care of the bodies and all of that. In this process, is there some play in having a wake or doing ceremony or anointing the body or any other kind of things by the family members before the green burial itself? Or do you have to have it within your custody, I guess, or whatever you would call it?
Yeah, no, we try and treat it just like any other funeral. So if people want to do a wake or something like that, they absolutely can. Um, Depending on the circumstances and how extensive they want to do services, they may have to sign waivers because there isn't going to be any embalming. If they want to stick green, they may have to sign some waivers depending on what they want to do and how long their loved one's going to be outside of storage before the burial itself. But no, they can absolutely do wakes and viewings and services, and especially on the boat, we've done tons of different types of memorial services. People have gone fishing while they're out there, flower petals out and then back. There's all kinds of different things. Officiants still come, things like that. So it doesn't really restrict much in the sense of a traditional funeral.
So if you wanted to be buried at Cuffy's Cove or Ocean View, you still need a mortuary, right?
Correct.
And these are both just cemeteries, not mortuaries.
Correct.
Okay, so you can do that.
You can come through us, or you could go through your local mortuary, Anchor Lucier. Any mortuary is going to be able to help you, get to the cemetery of choice. And then if any bumps are ran into along the road, they can always give me a call if you didn't come through the chapel itself.
But any mortuary will do the not embalming, and I mean, you're not going to have a shroud, right? If you want it.
I would say that most mortuaries are going to have the ability to order a shroud if you ask for one. As far as embalming and things, I have seen tons of different policies at different mortuaries depending on the services that you'd like. I tend to really lean into the green aspect of the green services. So if a family is willing to sign that they're okay with doing services without embalming, I'm pretty happy to do it. But I can't speak for other funeral homes on that sense.
It's going to depend on the policy of the funeral home.
Exactly, yeah. And that's one of our bullet points on your form you'll take home, that everything's going to hinge on the policy of the cemetery, which is my expertise. I obviously know the coastal cemeteries, and then whatever funeral home you select and their willingness to go that extra mile. Sure.
You mentioned lowering the body into the grave, that you wouldn't do it with just a shroud.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, the reason for that?
The reason for that, and I'll be honest with you since you're asking, is that the human body after death, it does stiffen up, but that doesn't last forever. And the optics of having the person flop in is not something that I'm wanting to do in front of families and things. The board allows for a graceful lowering into the ground.
Just a bottom board, basically, for under the body.
Correct. Yeah, we've got a wooden box with it's got little dip, yeah, so that they're secure on there. And then I've done it twice now, and sometimes one time they had a lid that they had us build for it, and the other time they wanted them open air. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any restrictions of where you can bury ashes, or like within it, or can you do it in your backyard? Can you do it in the woods, or is there, like, once people are cremated, it seems like you can scatter them more or less anywhere, so is it the same with burying ashes?
There are a lot of rules when it comes to burying ashes. Yeah, you're not technically supposed to just bury them in your backyard, and if you are going to a cemetery, you are supposed to get a permit and a plot and everything.
But for scattering, there's no restrictions per se, or are there?
It's similar. There's a permit process that you can go to a local funeral home, typically the one that did the cremation, and they can make you a permit. They'll ask you some questions about where you're trying to scatter and get a general idea to put on that permit and make sure that it's a legal location and everything.
Do you know an approximate dollar amount for the permit?
Yeah, so for the permit, it's $12.
So it's an easy.
Yeah, and it's easy for your funeral directors to create them. Yeah, not a problem at all.
And can that be at your home, or is that's not a legal spot?
Yeah, typically, at least in my funeral home, I advise not to get scattering or burial permits for your for your own home. When an urn or cremated remains are at home, at least in the eyes of the funeral home, it's typically in the home. With that said, it's your property, and
Yeah, I just want to say that I've lost people's ashes scattered in my house.
most people do.
No one told me I couldn't do it.
Just buried in the basement.
Yeah, well,
Right.
Requests from the people, they wanted them at our house. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I know this is not the topic of this conversation, but at some point, there was a person that buried their wife on their property, and they went through legal channels to do that. And then I haven't heard anything else about that, but we've lived on our property for 45 years, and we would love to be buried there.
Yeah, and I haven't actually visited that topic in quite some time, but the last time I did, when I was working in Eureka, to my knowledge, and Gloria Ann, your lovely funeral director here, can correct me if I'm wrong, but you would need to have your property designated as a memorial ground or a cemetery. And then
Permission from the county.
Could we have a site?
And, you know, I don't want to mislead at all, but I do know that it would be an extensive process. You know, I think you'd need to become at least somewhat of a cemetery. Yeah, and there's a couple spots on the coast that families have, like, a lot of family buried on property where they are kind of mini cemeteries, and I have got permission to bury there from the Bureau, but it's twice in 4 years, and it's family plots on family land that's over 20 people, you know, and headstones and everything. So they've been designated as, you know, memorial grounds, and they allowed us to bury. So it is possible. You know, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's really not legal at this stage.
Yeah.
Our president had his golf course designated as a cemetery.
Okay.
So he could bury his former wife there.
That was a hole in one, I guess.
There you go.
That was good.
Well done.
At least it wasn't a sand trap or something.
It was Dan Hubbard and his
Yeah,
wife,
yeah.
and very local. He's still there.
There is a precedent, I mean, they did eventually take it through the county to get permission so that it was possible.
Yeah, that's where I would start. Or if someone on the coast were asking, you know, I have them start with me, and then, you know, I don't mind doing legwork for people and going to the county and getting the information for them.
But going back to the cremation part, if you wanted to do that on your property, instead of a burial,
We would definitely,
that would be an option.
that would be an option.
Yeah.
What kind of chemicals are you using?
Well, the crematory that we use is natural gas. So, yeah, we use natural gas, fire, heat.
Embalm the body first and then
No.
cremate it?
Typically not. It's not illegal. Some people do if they want to have a long service beforehand. But, you know, on the topic of green, cremation's already going to be less green by nature. So, embalming, if someone is concerned with that, would definitely be something I would not recommend. But no, it's not unheard of to have someone embalmed before cremation.
Another question. If the body's on ice, let's say, can you bring it out for a day or like a week later to have a service?
Yeah, you know, and again, that's why I say the circumstances would always depend. When you say a day, you know, I definitely would want more detail on what that looks like, but for a service.
Service type of a thing, situation.
Yeah.
The body would be fine at that point.
Yeah, like I said, if there's anything that I felt uncomfortable with in that process, that I have, you know, there's waivers that can be signed that say, you know, this is in fact what we want to do, and that we're okay with it.
What about cost? Can you say either the average or range of costs separately for the mortuary and the cemetery?
So the cemeteries vary. And I definitely don't want to speak on their behalf. I don't want to mislead them. And as far as cost on the funeral home, that's also going to vary person to person pretty greatly. I did bring some materials if anyone wanted to talk afterwards in more detail on, what their idea of this, what you're asking, what you're actually looking for or asking about, and then I can give you a roundabout and show you the price list and, kind of walk you through it.
What about the at sea? What does that cost? An iron board or like the simplest at sea variation?
Yeah, they vary pretty greatly depending on, again, what each person's wanting. It depends on how many people are going on the boat.
Maybe you gotta provide poles and bait and stuff.
And the board fluctuates depending on what it costs us. We just do dollar for dollar on the board part, so it does truly vary, but they usually start around 6,000.
With the sea burials, though, you don't embalm or anything, do you?
No. No. Now, California has a recommendation that embalming is not done for burials at sea, though it's not legally, it's not a law. You can be embalmed and placed in a casket and dropped into the water, though the nature of it is to be more green. So, I would try and move someone away from that unless that was what they were dead set on. So.
I can remember there was some concern, and I've read a little bit about toxins stored in the body and trying to eliminate those toxins by inoculating the different types of mushrooms. Do you have any experience with that, the mushroom shroud?
I have tried. So the closest I've got is a company in the UK that can send the shroud. However, the cost was astronomical, and then it wasn't straightforward. Like, you just order it and they send it. It was an application, and it ended up not being, worth the time for the family at the time. But tried. I think that'll probably pick up a lot more once composting comes in 2027. It'll only expand into niches. That'll probably all fall under a similar umbrella.
There's a lot of mushroom farms. I wonder if they take on that as a product.
Yeah, and they're kind of cool. The company in the UK had some cool pictures and things. It's a really interesting idea and pretty organic. So.
We just have to all hang in there for a while.
Yeah, a couple years yet.
A little incentive. Keep going to yoga class.
Right. Yeah. Did you have another question?
Yeah, so are there any cemeteries that have turnover for your spot, so you're not taking up that spot indefinitely? Like, in order to have that space be available once you...
That's a great question. Not here. Not yet. There's plenty of space in our cemeteries in Mendocino County, though some cultures do that where, your family rents a plot for X amount of years, and then after you've decomposed, the next family can go in. I was just reading about a cemetery in Italy that does that.
New Orleans does too.
Oh, okay.
Because of the humidity and the way they're buried, they just push the ashes back and put the next body in.
Oh, yes, I've seen that as well, yeah.
Bare minimum, and it could be more than that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
They decompose really quick. So we just push them back and put the new one in.
Right. Pretty unique.
It's cool.
Yeah. The ingenuity. Yeah. Yeah. Any other curiosities?
How long have you done this?
So 7 years. 3 years in Eureka and then 4 years on the coast.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how did you get started?
College. Just looking for something that I could do overnight while doing my studies at Humboldt State University, and it was either this or bail bonds, and the funeral home called me back first, so yeah. Got into it and never really looked back. Yeah.
Are you able to incorporate this burial at sea into your breeding policies?
Yes. Thank you. Great question. Yeah, so it can be pre-planned to where your prices and package are guaranteed. where you pay ahead of time. We use an insurance company. At the time of death, your family owes nothing. We pull your policy, and then the funeral home gets paid that way, and that's how you can kind of get ahead of things and pre-plan. But yeah, it absolutely falls into our pre-planning.
And you said for the coast, you have to have residency and property, or property, what's the rules on that?
Yeah, we can revisit that. So, on the cemeteries on the coast, all of them except for Cuffy's Cove and Ocean View Cemetery require that you either currently live in the district of the cemetery, have lived in the district of the cemetery, or have property there. And then the fourth exception is if you've never lived there, but your family is buried there with an extra plot available. So.
District, does that mean like for Casper, is just the I don't know how big
Yep,
Casper's
275 people, and they've got their own little cemetery. Little River has a cemetery, also allows green burial, but Fort Bragg does not have its own. We have the two privately owned cemeteries, Rose Memorial Park, which has no green section, and then Ocean View Cemetery with the new green section. Inglenook and Westport are their own districts that also allow green burial, but same rules apply that you have to have lived there, own business there, currently live there, or family with a plot available. Okay. So for us inland, really Cuffy's Cove and Ocean View, along with burial at sea, would be your three coastal green options.
Well, it seems like the green burial idea, I salute, it seems like it's kind of coming into favor as opposed to your other options, is cremation or burial in a box.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, it's really gotten popular. I mean, burial is in a way having kind of a resurgence. It still is much more expensive than a cremation. It probably always will be. But yeah, the green burial is really becoming a talking point at the very least at this point. It'll be up to the cemeteries, as a lot of them are privately endowed, so it'll really be up to how they want their aesthetics to look, because I did mention those green burials do end up sinking, so you have to sacrifice a section for it. But and that's part of the reason why I did the talk, is that we have these cemeteries on the coast, and I know a lot of people have moved from the coast inland, and places like Cuffy's Cove allow anybody, so I didn't realize until earlier this year how far people have to travel sometimes for a green burial, and we're a little closer, so.
But Cuffy's Cove, I mean, it's kind of, I've been there several times, and it's a neat little place.
Yeah.
But it's kind of broken up. It's got the Bohemians, it's got the Catholic, and it's got, what's the other one? Druids.
Yeah, so the top part with the Druids is now no longer open. It's maintained, but there's no one buying plots for there. And then the other section, the larger section, is where all the plots that are currently available are. And it's not a green cemetery, so there are some that have vaults. There are some in, unorganic caskets, metal caskets, but they allow green burial. So if you do end up being buried there, you are, going to be mixed amongst green and non-green.
Plots are a one-time charge?
Yeah. You purchase your plot and then it's your property.
For some reason, EPA notification keeps jumping up.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I meant to go over that. Yeah, so one of the other things that California has funeral homes do after a burial at sea is within 30 days after we file a EPA notice, Environmental Protection Agency, letting them know the exact coordinates of where we dropped the individual, the weather of the day, different things like that. There's a worksheet that we fill out and send off to them so they can keep track of who's in the ocean and where. And it's good. I have used the report once so far in my 4 years there to look up a family member's, coordinates so they could go take a charter boat out and fish in the area. So, it could be useful, especially if I can think of more severe situations where people are trying to figure out where their loved one is, or if family connections get disconnected and you call the funeral home, we can bring some closure.
Does your mortuary have its own boat?
No. So we use 2 boats out of Fort Bragg, the Viking with Captain Darren, and then All Aboard Adventures with Captain Tim. Yeah. And as I mentioned, if anyone wants to dive deeper into detail and pre-planning, we can set a time up, or we can, I can get a packet going for you guys and have everybody's information in it. Ocean Views, manager, Cuffy's Cove's manager, information about the boat and the captain, things like that.
So where's the chapel by the sea? Where is that?
It's in Fort Bragg.
Whereabouts in Fort Bragg?
It's on the north end over by the middle school on Fur Street. Pretty close to the railroad tracks. Close to Rose Memorial Park. It's visible. Close enough.
I may have missed this, but does the Willits mortuary deal with green burials as well, or do they come to you?
Gloria Ann is here with the Willits mortuary, but any mortuary is typically going to have the ability to do a green burial. Yeah, and on the coast, me and Gloria Ann work well together. If she were to set up a green burial on the coast, we have no problem filling in the gaps. Yeah, kind of on that point, that is one thing. There's no staff at these cemeteries. That's one reason why they allow them to be green, is because there's no staff that's going to be bringing lawnmowers over it, having to worry about the divots and things. Twice a year they all get weed whacked and things like that, but they are district cemeteries, so there's more leniency, but there's also less care than you'll see in an endowed cemetery, which usually has all the restrictions and things like that. So yeah, with that being said, there are some challenges, but no matter what funeral home you ended up going through, Chapel by the Sea is always there to help and get the job done. Yeah. Any concluding questions? And do we think anyone would want me to put a packet together for them with, our pricing and some contact information for people and things? Okay, I'll get a few of those going for us, okay? I really appreciate you all letting me be here and talking with you guys. Yeah, of course. Oh, thanks.